Welcome to FSLA. I have the privilege of just having a conversation today with Anastasia Sprout, Dearborn, and Lacey Bentley. And I know we don't have that much time, so we're just going to dive right in. But maybe each of us could just share very briefly your name and your background. And we want to dive into topic of genre of porn. So, Anastasia, would you like to open it up?
I would be glad to. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast for this conversation. And we're doing a video as well. It's so important. I am a retired licensed clinical psychotherapist, LICSW. I now work as a global coach specializing in supporting people who have survived organized extreme abuse, for example, satanic or occult ritual abuse, trauma-based mind control, etc. And I am also a recovering porn addict myself. And I've written a book about my recovery called Naked in Public. And that is really formative in my choice of career to specialize in working with people who are struggling with compulsive sexual behaviors or infidelities or relational issues. So now, just glad to be raising public awareness with a team of wonderful uh, helping professionals because we're seeing this in our offices affecting families, women, children, men, everybody, trans folks, everybody. So I'm glad we can talk about it.
Thanks for sharing, Anastasia. And just a side note, she started this FSLA, Female Sex Love Addiction Consultation Group, and we meet every Friday morning. And I, I just feel so honored that I've been able to be part of this group. So, Anastasia, thank you for spearheading this group, and each
Pleasure.
of you have really inspired me. So I give credit to all of you for helping me also launch my podcast, which I never thought I would ever do. So, all right, I'm just gonna go down the screen. So, Ali, would you be able to share next?
So I'm Allie Dearborn, and I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for almost 20 years, which is kind of interesting to reflect on. But my area of expertise has been kind of out of the gate adolescent development, and then pretty quickly looking at systemic forms of violence, from community violence and impacts of family violence and interpersonal forms of violence on children and teens mostly, um, and really looking kind of in the trauma world, and focused on what ended up being sexual abuse and prevention. And I primarily work with adults at this point, and mostly female survivors of trauma. And I myself am a trauma survivor, and see the kind of world that we live in, and as needing to be held accountable to some degree for the ways in which violence against women and girls seems to be sort of normalized or tolerated, and particularly amplified in the kind of realm of pornography. So I've been, over the past few years, working more directly on anti-pornography efforts to really make those connections in terms of the public health awareness campaign around the, violence against women, and kind of on a systemic global basis, and how pornography, prostitution, trafficking, in which, people are being bought and sold is really a human rights violation, and an issue that needs to be addressed on all levels, from the, micro individual addiction, how we get impacted, to the macro kind of systems. So it's a great conversation. Also hard to limit it to little nuggets of time because it's very complex, but I'm excited to be part of the conversation.
And Ali is another warrior here, and we'll have another episode of what she did. She wrote a paper to what was it, the UN, right? The UN paper, and that's a whole nother thing going on that's so amazing. So I'll let her share about it maybe in our very near future episode. So hats off to you too, Ali. All right, Lacey, would you share quickly about yourself?
Sure.
Another.
So professionally, I started working with women in recovery from pornography and trying to get word out there that pornography is a human issue, not a man's issue, and working in anti-exploitation with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation and Nicosi, and doing some of my own research on women and pornographic materials and content and the different genres. And um, moved into women's recovery coaching, helping women to quit porn, love addiction, sex addiction. I wrote a book about my own love addiction recovery, Addicted to Love. And my journey started at 13 in 1989 with erotic stories and erotic literature. Um, and then moved into sexualized anime, hentai, which literally means pervert. And kind of then went into eating disorders and love addiction and all kinds of hot messes. And so now I help women to quit that same stuff. I actually put my coaching on pause while I'm getting my master's in marriage and family therapy and licensing as a therapist. So I'm really, really excited about that. Almost have 1 year down.
Yay! Thank you, Lacey, for sharing. And you also have just many accolades. I admire the work that you do. So thank you so much. You're, I know, going to add so much to our conversation today as well. So I'm so excited that you're here. I feel like all of you are many, many steps ahead of me, but just also quickly introduce myself. I'm Rika Lopez, and I'm a licensed marriage family therapist and a certified sex addiction therapist. And I work with men, women, couples dealing with sexually addictive behaviors like love, porn, and relationship addiction and betrayal trauma, infidelity, work with couples. And yeah, so it's just been really neat to continue learning about this topic because I just feel like, especially in the Asian American Christian community, we don't talk about these things. And so I want to advocate and I want to psychoeducate as many people as possible. So that's a little bit about myself. And so now I want to turn to Anastasia. She created this list called Porn Genre Checklist. And so I'll just have you share about that piece, Anastasia.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you. This is a picture of a document that I created, Porn Categories Checklist, and it's going in and out of focus here, but I'm going to get my glasses. So this is a way that clinicians can actually try to open up the conversation with clients, or if you're a consumer of pornography, then you can get a little bit of a visual reflection about what it is that you are drawn to. Probably as I read through this, it could be upsetting. For many who have consumed porn, there are erotic associations. There are also a great deal of violent associations with these categories. So I am in no way endorsing pornography when I say this. In fact, in my referring it, I call it rape media. I think it's brainwashing. I think it's a weaponized tool for mass mind control, unfortunately. And it disempowers people, whether they know it or not. So that's my opinion and experience and clinical witnessing about pornography. However, it's also near and dear to many people's hearts. It's how they're using, it's how they're surviving. They don't want to give it up, and they may have very positive associations with these categories. It may be how people find their identity. It may be how people find community online or even in person. So, as Ali said, this is a very complex issue, but I do want to read through because it's kind of like out of the shadows into the light. Like, let's bring it into the conversation and into the rooms of healing. What are people looking at? So in this tool, you just check the kinds that you have seen and you circle the kinds that you seek. So there's seen and seek, and that's really important because we can all be exposed to all kinds of weird things online, but when we actually use our will to go seek it out, that is another level, what I would call indoctrination. However, it just depends. It can also be a reflection of people's sexual templates However, again, my experience is that someone may start at the top with some of these that are reflective of just sexual preferences. But what porn does, and AI logarithm, it's actually a marketing funnel to groom and funnel people into the darker and darker, more dense and depraved categories. So you'll see that it's not in perfect order, but you'll see that as I go through. So we start with straight or heterosexual porn, lesbian, bisexual, or threesomes, gay, transgender, cross dressing, clothing types, group, sex, or pornography, female friendly or female oriented, what's called ethical pornography. Artistic can be a genre of porn, fan fiction, erotica porn, celebrity porn, porn performer or porn stars, sex tapes, reality porn, uh, erotic massage, romance porn, vintage or pinup, historical figures, video game pornography, amateur porn, virtual reality, stripping or pole dancing, religious themed pornography, vampire or fantasy, sci-fi, alien, monster, dinosaur, etc., costume, cosplay, stuffed animals, hentai, anime, cartoons, superhero pornography, tickling genre, large penis, large breasts. I could say large scrotum in there. Anything kind of unusual, outsized. It can also be the opposite. I don't have it on here, but it can be very small. So just the whole gamut is out there. Big Beautiful Woman is a genre. Foot, feet, foot fetish, high heels. Other body parts or types, anything you can imagine typically is there. Now you get into categories of people, Asian people, African American people, other people of color. There's also, oops, sorry, it's very sensitive here. Uh, Racial abuse or slavery themed porn. It's a cousin of BDSM, bondage, domination, submission, sadomasochism. You have webcams and roulette webcams. There's objects penetration. Then you get into choking, strangulation, pornography, which again, now we're getting into more of things that may be illegal, maybe very violent, maybe very, very dangerous, like anything related to the airway closing can cause brain damage. Public exposure, anal pornography, medical, surgical, mask themed, MILF, which if you don't know is Mothers I'd Like to F, cream pie or post ejaculation. There can be bodily fluids at specific places like face, things that are smeared in or in there's then you get into teen, which, you know, again, if it's legal, they can call it teen, but it can really be 18 plus. Nursing, breast milk, diapers. There's adult baby aid. I can't remember what that is, but that is a whole genre and quote unquote community. Schoolgirl, boy, young looking adults. Then you get into unwanted touching, what we used to call fraudurism clinically. And then you get into actual underage. So now you can be having rape media related to, or imagery, exploitation imagery related to babies through toddler, children through preteen, teen, 13 to 17. Babysitter, camp counselor, or other abuse or incest scenarios by older family member or authority figures, teachers, etc. Sibling incest, family pornography genres, bestiality, animal, insect, bird harming. And now again, even just saying these out loud is really painful for me. I just want to cry. And yet the desensitization that happens through watching this stuff, and if you started out with one thing and you're curious and you click and you're curious and go, people can get here, not even realize it, or by that time be so desensitized, they're just kind of in this like psychopathic curiosity and it doesn't touch them at all. It doesn't feel real. It feels like a fantasy, but let me tell you, it absolutely is real. If we had more time, I could share. Double penetration, in other words, two orifices being penetrated by an object or a penis of one female or one male, gangbang, forced sex rape. There's the genre of massive amounts of partners in one day. So this woman, you know, basically allowed herself to be exploited by 1,000 men today, or however many. I mean, it just is so extreme. We're looking at forced sex or rape genre, satanic, Luciferian, or occult ritual abuse, hypnotic, mind control porn, hidden camera, upskirt, voyeuristic, exhibitionistic flashing, kidnapping, sex trafficking, themed pornography, gore, blood, wounds, violence, assault, injuries. And there's a slot, toward whom is the injury? Toward yourself? Is it toward someone else? So people are starting to look at this torture back to like restraint and physical harm, which can be very overlapping with BDSM, which is, supposedly kind of mainstreamed and cool, but it's very related often to actual torture. Snuff stands for recorded murder. It's a euphemism. I call it kill porn or death pornography, death media. And then there's other, because I know I can never think of everything and things are just blooming out there. So I'm sure you all are thinking of things that I even forgot. I'm going to stop my share now. Thank you for holding that reading. I feel
Wow.
furious. Furious. I just want to acknowledge it's all out there waiting for kids, just right at the touch of a cell phone. Scares me. Thank you. Ugh.
Oh, that's so much. That's a lot. So heavy and so evil, so dark.
Truly, it's like the term that comes to my mind, and I think kind of in reflection on, just like if we place in context, kind of, like the mind control or kind of what brainwashing or thought reform is, which is this, kind of process of getting people to believe something that they wouldn't previously have believed, which is sort of this malignant normality. Like this is, objectively, in no other context outside of this idea of, kind of like the sexuality realm, like in no other context would a list of these types of behaviors be considered anything, many of these behaviors to be considered anything outside of the realm of illegal, criminal, felony, torturous, right? Like, just objectively wrong, kind of from all legal and ethical frameworks that we operate in, like a complete violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to exist free from threat of violence, coercion, or harm. And when you co-opt like all of the neuroscience that we've been able to gather over the past couple of decades, that what wires together fires to, what fires together wires together. And, and so you start to pair erotic intended content with violence, criminality, felony, torture acts, right? And you get this, what we know in kind of the CSAT realm, like this idea of like eroticizing things that are not meant to be eroticized. And I think the categories, sort of create this malignant normality, like you have a menu of options of things that should never be considered options, right? In the context of a world in which causing harm is, like a violation of our code.
Thank you, Allie. I just feel that fiery passion coming out as you're sharing. And I mean, this topic, it does require so much, I think, courage to even, hold space for and talk about.
That reminds me of, I was at a couple of times I've heard this, that yeah, okay, sure. So women use porn too, and maybe some of these categories, but women's pornography usage, women's sexuality doesn't get as dark and deep as men's. And that belief actually blows my mind because of some of the conversations I've had and knowing about, hearing about from a colleague of mine, someone she knew whose wife was creating torture porn with him and their children. And I have to say, when are we going to stop pretending that only one sex can be, or only one group of people can be led into and like just, what's the word I'm looking for? Manipulated into escalation to where torture of their own children for creation of illegal pornographic images is something that women do too, and men do too. We want so badly to believe women are incapable, women don't, women wouldn't. Well, if you abuse someone long enough, if you manipulate them long enough, lots and lots and lots of victims become perpetrators. And they can get even darker than what happened to them because their baseline is so much more painful and so much more deviant that I feel like we need to take the mask off and quit pretending. Man, men are screwed up. Like, no, this is a whole human thing. And the women who are unwillingly participating is one category. And then there are women who are perpetrating. So let's be real.
Thank you for sharing that, because I have published I'm writing a book called Temporarily Evil about my own involvement and my family's involvement in the West Coast pornography ring network, and it included horrific abuse, and I was a forced participant of that. And so I want to acknowledge I have definite experience with what you're saying and the kinds of things that was done to me, and then I was forced and coerced to do to others, and then that being on film, and then the brainwashing and the mind control, like, oh, you're a star and it's either you or them, and those kinds of beliefs getting in there in children's minds, and then they get rigid and fixed. And I think there's tons of perpetrators out there that they may have no idea of what they're doing in a general sense, but if they're hiding from being caught, then there's some part of them that knows and is still stuck in there. And so yeah, that's really important. And I know, Rika, you were moved to this by your love for children and your concern about the bridge that is so intentionally made by the rape, sex, pornography industry to target children through grooming of child cartoons, video game characters, superheroes, things they're naturally going to be looking up as soon as they get a phone in their hand. And then pretty soon it goes right to sexualized images and the damage that does to a child's brain.
Which happened recently, actually, and I can look for the link, but the Wicked toy release, when the movie came out, there was a link on the toy box for the toys that went out with the Wicked character dolls, figures, that linked directly to a pornography site. And so if we talk, like direct targeted marketing to children. So if you enter into a Google search bar, for example, like, characters from Wicked, whatever. And I don't know what their names are. So, but put that in there. And what you'll get is maybe a link to some valid things about the movie, but also a link to all of the pornified media that have been produced featuring that character. Or you go to a page and then there's ads with, kind of the, pop-ups, and just the ways in which sort of we know that accidental exposure for children specifically is often through these places in which there should be, it's like their neutral territory, like Roblox, playing the video game. And then here's these, predators come to the playground. Like that's what they do. And we just have these additional kind of avenues and spaces for that to occur. But marketing wise, if you kind of go, it's like Joe Camel and this old cigarette ads, it's like where, you had cartoon cigarettes, and then we realize, oh, that's marketing to children and that's not okay. And I think we're looking to that awareness again.
Yeah, I remember seeing a slide in one of the trainings, and they had categories of all these cartoons. And I remember Teen Titan was one, and that stood out because my kids, enjoy Teen Titans. And I'm like, oh no, like that's gonna, I mean, there's already pornographic, what materials on Teen Titan and Avengers, all these superheroes. And I just had this like gut wrenching like feeling when I saw that list. And yeah, so I just was so disturbed immediately.
Well, and something that parents need to be aware of along those lines, one of my children got exposed because porn makers will purchase URLs that have common misspellings children make, or that are very close to what the cartoon or characters are, or what they might look up. And this is how my 11-year-old got, like, we did so good protecting our kids. And then all of a sudden, my 11-year-old mistypes a word that children commonly mistype. And now he's watching horrific bestiality. And just like, I'm not going to get into what he saw, but my mind was blown that he mistyped this word. That's where he went. And just boom, there's these horrible things happening to women and animals. And he said he was just stuck. He didn't, like, he couldn't, he was so surprised at what he saw, he couldn't stop watching.
Traumatized, so he goes into shock, and then it just
Right.
gets right in.
And he just watched. He was like, and then I'm going, what's going on with my kid the last week? He's having nightmares. He's like, there was this palpable change in him. And then, we get to the bottom of it. And because it had shocked him in such a way, like, he kept going back to try to make sense of it, which is what children will do. And it's why many children, young girls, even teen boys and girls and non-binaries, like, this is why people will go to these children, will go back because they're trying to make sense of what happened to them or what they just saw or something they heard somebody say, and they just keep going back to try to make sense. Which, I mean, why not? That's what we do, right? When we want to understand something, we research it. It's a natural human tendency to be curious and want to understand something.
And it naturally can activate, depending on the age of the child and their development, their sexual arousal, which then immediately pairs something deviant with sexual arousal. And then kids, if they have no one to talk to about, start to think that they're a horrible, deviant person. And the shame goes right in there and it just reinforces. And I've seen that, someone tells me something in my office, the first time they ever told anyone, they've harboring shame for 30 years, that they got aroused because they saw something, when actually, because of mirror neurons, when we see sexual activities, it can arouse us in a, that's a natural response. So the industry itself is very cunning, very predatory, and very parasitic about children. It's always trying to suck out children's innocence and replace it with shame, and it's just so terrible. But that's how they create addicts, right? I couldn't help it. I had to go back. I had this compulsion for 30 years. So what I make up is you probably interrupted that cycle with your child. True?
Hopefully. Yeah. It's no longer an issue. And at that point, we were like, okay, we're having another conversation. And see, we would have dinner time conversations. We're like, okay, has anybody been exposed to porn in our home? Because we had filters on. I don't know how this got through. We had barriers and firewalls, and, like, we were prepared. We were a prepared family, and still this got through because of misspelling on a website. It was ridiculous. But yeah, then we had more conversations, and yeah, we only, out of 4 male-bodied, one of our youngest is actually non-binary, but out of 4 male-bodied, we only had 1 deal with actual pornography addiction. But even then we're going, but we were careful. Like, this is a family who is aware, and we're teaching this stuff, and I'm researching, and I'm speaking at international conferences, and my kids are getting exposed. And I know what to do.
Yeah, it's humbling. It's so humbling. I'm really glad we're talking about this. I made up a thing I called it porn traumatic stress disorder, because I saw these symptoms and I made a checklist. So I can send that if you want, but it's like we have to find a way to trace back the cause of the, the injuries to the porn. And I think that's what a lot of people are in denial about. Like, they defend the porn industry as if it's not the biggest psychopathic, dark tetrad conglomerate that ever existed. Oops, I got stuck a little. I'll pause speaking. Oh, there we go. And it's putting people together. It's like, oh, what caused that? I think it had to do with that. And it can be one image. One image. I mean, I was so in love with Nancy Drew as a child, and then my dad had a Playboy with Nancy Drew eroticized on the cover, the woman who acted like her, you know, in the on TV. And it like, oh, that's who I need to be. Like it just got in. And there's more things that affected me than that. But that's, you know, these heroes are co-opted and it's made to seem okay. We know this. So yeah.
That's very intentional. Like, why would they put teeny bopper porn stars the second they turn 18? Why would they want to photo shoot them? This is on purpose.
Yeah, totally. Right. It's like thinly disguised hebephilia, right? Which is the slightly older version of the pedophilia. And
Yeah. Attraction to underage teenagers. Yeah.
so it's
And I
yeah.
know we probably don't have much time to get into the nitty-gritty of everything, you know, that was covered, and it's just kind of scratching the surface. But I guess for parents with young children or educators that are around children, what is maybe just like one practical thing that we can help, you know, what I guess suggestions or what practical guidelines can we share with parents regarding this?
A group
Also,
of parents getting together, taking the checklist and talking about the porn categories so they're prepared to talk with their kids about what's out there has been very effective in my community.
yeah, and I want to say, watch what your children are watching and look for the hidden messages. I saw it even in Pokemon with Brock and his eyes dropping out, and he's in love with Nurse Joy, every Nurse Joy he meets. And they're these clones of each other. Like, let's talk about clones. Like, it's a whole nother conversation. But, and in Texas this past week, they're actually looking at House Bill 20, which is going to illegalize hentai and not a specific genre necessarily, but they're coming for porn and video games that are targeting children. And if it looks like a child, I'm hoping this passes because it's going to start an incredible precedence where if it looks like a child, if it's meant to look like a child, it's now illegal. So I'm following that closely. And there's a reason I'm so grateful that a state is onto this and is recognizing what's happening and is taking action. And we as parents, though, we can't trust the government or anyone else. We need to watch what our children are watching and look for those hidden messages. And, you know, can he possibly be in love with her? No, those are called hormones. He's a 16-year-old boy. That's normal. Let's normalize what's normal, right? Sexual arousal is normal. Let's normalize that. And let's say now he hardly knows her, yet wants to jump her. Let's talk about the fact that she's not an object to be jumped. She's a whole person. He has no idea who that person is.
Also, parents who address their own pornography use, because a barrier for them to talk about porn with their kids is the fact that they have secrets with themselves. And so, if they're addressing and they're coming to terms with whatever they're deciding, that will help them to have a more heartfelt conversation with their partners and other parents to support them, or counselors, or and ultimately their children.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love, Lacey, that you brought up some of the, you know, kind of bills that are up or kind of being considered, or because the positioning of, you know, it's kind of like, you know, parents' job to have controls on the devices, you know, versus it's society's job to not, you know, allow this content to be freely accessible on devices. You know, it's like that, you know, it's like that this is not like an individual, you know, while it's important to have literacy conversations, you know, it's like we've got media literacy, what we're watching on TV, we've got techno literacy, like how we engage in this like digital sphere in general. you know, and kind of like this like idea about like sexuality literacy, which is like really difficult to counter sort of these like sex on demand type of messages where like that's kind of the where we're saturated in our whole culture. You know, it's like all media even, you know, it's like even shows that used to be something that would be like X-rated or like, you know, on nighttime TV, you know, and so I think there's an element of looking to be involved in look what is your, you know, on your state, local level, kind of what can you be doing to get involved with actions to try to do a better job to hold tech accountable for the proliferation of trafficking, violence, and the ways in which like the psychological harm that's being caused and that damage to these very early developing templates. But how also just like that being in those waters in which these things are there is being sort of turned, you know, blind eye, not talked about, right? Like kind of, we have to bring it out of the shadows, like kind of Anastasia was saying with the list.
You are doing that with your paper and getting it to the UN, and there's been media created out of that. One other thing I want to say, a nod to you, Rika, what you're doing is creating space for women to teach girls about sexuality in the context of love and whole person and spirituality and ethical, like things that when you follow those ethical principles, we feel good about ourselves, we feel good in our bodies, we feel good with our partners. They're just helping people. You know, we're having to correct a society that is massively inverted, so we do focus on this negative because they're out ahead of us, way ahead of us in so many ways with the mass stuff. But on the individual level, heart to heart teaching girls, teaching through churches, you know, small groups, that is utterly changing the world, and I'm so excited for that work to continue and flower in all kinds of environments.
Thank you. Thank you for that encouragement, Anastasia.
Mm.
So I think that, yeah, I just want to be respectful of time for everyone. So yeah, thank you. I mean, for getting the ball rolling with this conversation. I feel so pumped. I just want like more and more conversations because I think, yeah, like I said, we just kind of scratched a bit of the surface, and I know there's so many layers to go through with this topic. And so I guess we'll save that for another time. So
Well, thank you
thank
so
you.
much for having us here.